Mr. Carl Lemley feels it would be a little unkind to present this picture without just a word of friendly warning. I think it will thrill you. It may shock you. It might even horrify you. So if any of you feel that you do not care to subject your nerves to such a strain, now is your chance to, well, we've warned you.
Welcome to the Fandom Outpost, your podcast for all things pop culture.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Fandom Outpost. I am 1/3 your host. My name is Mark.
I'm Jim.
And I'm Bob. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the show. And if you like this video, we'd really appreciate if you like and subscribe to our channel. We'd really appreciate it. So with that, on with the show.
So it is October. We are deep into October, and we have a penchant for scary stuff here at our channel, and we have an appreciation for what came before. That's how I'll introduce that. And so today we're going to delve back into history and talk about what is commonly referred to as the Universal Monsters movies, Universal Monster movies and stuff. And what I mean by Universal Monsters, I don't mean all around. I mean the studio, Universal Studios. They put out a bunch of films back starting from the late, I don't know, 20s or whatever, and then on up. So we're going to delve into that. Some of you, if you're in our age group, you're going to kind of be like, oh yeah, it's going to be a walk down that kind of memory lane. And if you're younger than that and you haven't really taken the time to watch those, you should, because everything is born out of that. So,
well, let's identify the main group, right? We talked about the Rushmore of Universal Monsters, the classic Universal Monsters, and obviously it's Dracula, Frankenstein.
Yep, Wolfman,
Mummy, right?
Wolfman, Mummy.
Creature's in there, but he comes in at in the 50s, so we're going to leave him out of this one.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know, dude. He's like, so this could be a weird segue. He's like Captain America when they brought him in like Avengers 4. They just retroactive made him like a member.
Right.
And I think the creature is so iconic that he's still, still got to get a mention because he had a look that was very like, wow. I remember when I saw it, I was like, wow.
Well, we're going to keep it to the 4, so before we go off on a tangent.
So in 1938, okay, DC Comics launched Superman, all right? First appearance of Superman in Action Comics, right? 1938. Everybody considers that's the birth. So I always kind of look at the Universal Monsters like that. So the equivalent of that Superman would be Dracula. And Dracula has a storied history. Now, my personal opinion of like the classics, that's not necessarily my favorite, even though I'm a huge vampire guy. I think some other directors came along and told stories a little bit better. But Dracula, from a source material that was only, 30 years old at the time when that came out? Something like that?
No, it seemed to have used multiple sources. It uses Bram Stoker's novel. It uses The Tale of Nosferatu. And it had stage plays going on at the time. And I think it kind of collaborated all those elements into it. It's not quite exactly what the book is, but right.
Well, I've never understood that stage play thing, which I find fascinating that somebody made that into a stage play, which starred Bela Lugosi, if I'm not mistaken. He came from the stage play, right?
Right. He was on Broadway at the time they were making Dracula. So that's how he got attached to the project. Well, they originally had envisioned Lon Chaney Sr. It was going to be his project, but he had died of cancer.
Oh,
so
wow.
he was never able to.
I never knew that. That's some cool trivia. Yeah. And I know by today's standards, it's hard for people to imagine Bela Lugosi being this, like he was a suave Dracula, and people were like charmed by him, and I'm like, wow.
With a lot of these monsters, I mean, the audience would identify with certain aspects of them. So a lot of the times they're outsiders that are scorned because of either physical traits or the way they look, and people identify with that, I think. And there's kind of some different types of creatures. There's like inhuman creatures, and then there's the creatures that are kind of stripped of their humanity. So there's a couple different ways that these monsters are kind of portrayed.
The lure of Dracula as a book or whatever, or a character, is sex, death, immortality.
Yeah,
I mean,
dude,
it's right. It's right there.
Forbidden fruit. It's that
Right.
forbidden
Vampirism
fruit with him.
is that. Yeah.
You know, it's funny too. So when Dracula hits, there's not a lot of, and it's the only thing that I know, but like there's not a lot of novels written about like that subject matter. And the only one that obviously I won't spend time on it, that beat it to the screen is the Murnau's Nosferatu, the silent version. So you don't have like we have today, which there's so much lore to pull from and novels, and everybody takes a crack at vampirism. Sorry to segue for a second. I was just talking to somebody yesterday about that Frank Langella one, and I got a really soft spot for that thing. There's a 79 version of Dracula made with Frank Langella. That thing is great, man. That dude exudes charisma and sex.
Right. Yeah. Bela Lugosi certainly was very exotic.
Yeah, yeah.
Right.
And he had that voice.
That plays into a little bit of what's going on too. He's the European outsider invading Britain.
Right guy for the right project.
Right.
Casting is 100% the what makes that movie.
Right. And so I know, Jim, you know all about this. I don't know his name, the guy who played Van Helsing.
Oh, Edward Van Sloan. And they had played it on stage, so they had chemistry.
Right. And your villain is only as good, or your hero is only as good as your villain. But if you go back and watch that movie, it's unfortunate. That guy is really cardboard.
Right. That whole film is very stiff because it's literally a film stage play.
Right. And at the time, weren't they doing the Spanish version as well?
At nighttime, the Spanish crew would come in and do the version because they didn't have dubbing figured out. The big difference is the camera moves were a little more in that.
Okay.
The guy playing Dracula is a little over the top. I don't know.
Okay.
Because these people are coming from silent films, perhaps that is the reason for it.
That's a good point. I didn't think about that.
And then the American, and we can't forget in Dracula, we can't forget Dwight Fry as Renfield because he, is
he
close
stole
to
the
stealing.
show.
He steals every scene he's in. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, he chews it really hard. Yeah, he's second only to Bela Lugosi in that, only because Lugosi's the star. But
right,
yeah, Renfield is. Yeah, it just seems like everybody who kind of gets the Renfield part, they get the chance to chew.
Yeah, I just watched the Coppola version the other day. And Tom Waits is Renfield in that, and he's really kind of over the top in that. But
dude, the casting for that was not even the Coppola, but Tom Waits as Renfield. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. That guy's really underrated.
So the master.
Yeah, dude, really underrated. I'm like, man.
So Dracula proves to be a huge success for Universal. It's one of these things that saves the studio. Which will happen from time and time again for Universal. Every time they're in the toilet, they're like, let's make another monster movie.
It's interesting. It's also, right, you mentioned the revenue is what drives everything with these
Absolutely.
movies. If they didn't do well, we probably wouldn't have our monster legacy, but it does do well. And it's also, we should mention that this is pre-code, the Hays Code.
Yes, that's a big factor in all that.
1934 to 54, and it's kind of a self-policing thing against immoral depictions on screen that was instituted, and that was before that. So these movies were like they could do whatever, pretty much on screen at the time. More tame than it is today, but still, they didn't have to dance around things as much as they did after, which then they really had to have a lot of subtext and dance around the sex and the underpinnings of all that. So that's kind of the context of
right. And even though tame, there's no blood on screen. There's no, like, he's killed off screen, which to me is one of the, that's such a perplexing thing to me. Not that there's no climax. It's like the couple in the foreground or whatever, you got to do this and stuff, struggle. And then, Van Helsing just walks off the camera,
Right.
and that's it. And the threat has ended when he comes back. Yeah. So I'm like, well, that's weird.
As they ascend the staircase in the Abbey, that our happy couple,
I was
goes into the light. And
If that's today, we'd be like, he ain't dead. We didn't see he was killed off screen. We didn't see that sequel. So I just think that's amazingly funny.
A few more, right? Before the code hits, we should probably get into the big one, Frankenstein. But you got Frankenstein, Mummy, and Invisible Man that come before the Hays Code. And then after, we could talk about the couple that come after. But we should probably delve into Frankenstein a bit, because that's another biggie, right? It's kind of the top two foundational monsters.
Success of
That's
Dracula,
a huge one. Yeah.
breeds Frankenstein, and originally it was set to star Lugosi. So when they did some test makeup on him, apparently no one has pictures or footage or whatever it is, but they made him very, if you're familiar with the silent film The Golem, they kind of made him like that. Yeah, and the story of that Frankenstein is a little bit different than what ended up on the screen. So they kind of canned that, and they brought in James Whale, who was a popular director at the time, and he took it from there.
Well, I've seen Lugosi in makeup, I'm pretty sure, as the monster, not the golem thing, but like later on.
Oh, yeah, meets the Wolfman. He plays.
Yeah,
he
with
plays
like the lifts and stuff on his feet,
Yeah,
like the
yeah,
fucking shoes that are this big, looking like kiss boots. Well, if I'm not mistaken, the original Frankenstein novel, because when they did the mashing of the body parts and stuff, I mean, eventually he heals. He's just there's the stitch marks. They eventually heal up, and he's just this, like Bob said, he's one of the outcasts.
Yeah, the movie's quite different from the novel.
The movie's almost completely different from the novel, which is funny, because all of our trappings that we get with Frankenstein. I mean, you say Frankenstein to someone, they're immediately thinking of what the Universal Studios Frankenstein looks like: flat head, big boots, stitched on the wrists, bolts in his neck, and
his neck,
really stiff, sunken eyes.
He's a sympathetic monster, which is not
which
many
is
people
great.
think of that.
Oh, by the way, folks, there's a common misconception. So if you're just joining this type of talk for the first time, Dr. Frankenstein is the gentleman who steals the bodies and puts the monster together, which is commonly referred to as Frankenstein, but it's not. It should be Frankenstein's monster. But over the years, we just haven't done that. When you say Frankenstein, like Jim said, you associate it with a certain thing.
Hot take on this is that the monster is the son, technically the progeny of Frankenstein, so he gets to be called Frankenstein because that's his dad.
Yeah.
There you go.
So I fixed it for everybody. I fixed it.
Mary Shelley's Frankenstein is a fucking masterpiece. If you've never read it, folks, go out, take the time and read it. It's a very good novel. Unlike Dracula, which is written in the prose of like journal notes, so that one's a little bit, you might have to reread a couple chapters and you're like, okay. But Frankenstein reads like a horror novel.
Yeah, Marvel Comics did a great adaptation of that with illustrations by Bernie Wrightson, right?
I knew you were going to mention that, man.
I got Bernie a big print of it here somewhere. But one of the greatest things about that adaptation is there's a foreword by Stephen King, and he says, you're going to read this, and then you're going to go, what? And you're going to put it down, and you're going to try and reread it a couple times before he says, but stick with it, because it's not the Frankenstein that you're used to, so, and it's written in an older way that people used to write books.
Right. So. Yeah. So, but, and dude, the story of Frankenstein is just amazing anyways. Like there's been even movies told about the night or the creation of her writing that story and stuff.
Gothic and
yeah, exactly. So there's all kinds of connections about that because people really love that. She was just like, I'm going to write this monster story,
Yeah, a group of poets together that had a writing contest, and she kicked everyone's ass, right?
Yeah, she did.
Does he eventually fit into the role of the evil monster, or is it always this, sympathetic type thing?
In the Universal canon, he becomes a little more. When we get to Bride, he's not happy at all. Because everybody just tried to kill him and set him on fire, and
right, he's a little angry.
Yeah, that is as good a way to put it as I've ever heard. He is not happy.
Frankie not happy.
for good reason, right?
And basically, it's funny because he's like, Karloff is like, I'm gonna fuck you up.
There's a great one of my favorite scenes in that is we're really kind of skipping over the main Frankenstein film, but one of my favorite scenes in Bride is Dr. Pretorius is trying to convince Henry to build the mate, and he's like, no, get out of here, I don't want anything to do with it. And he's like, oh, I brought somebody to persuade you, and they open the door and he's standing there and he's burnt, and the monster is standing there, and he looks like he's about to just tear everybody up, and
right.
and then he says something, he talks all of a sudden, and they're like, holy crap, he can talk, and Pretorius is like, there's been some improvements.
Frankenstein and Bride of Frankenstein are the pair, right?
That's almost one movie.
Yeah, it continues from the first film, but in the first Frankenstein, we get Colin Clive as a great Dr. Frankenstein. He's very driven, obsessed. We get Edward Van Sloan back as his teacher.
Yeah.
So Edward Van Sloan comes back into that. We get Dwight Fry back, but this time he is Fritz. The assistant of Dr. Frankenstein, not Igor.
Don't know.
The assistant
don't know where
of
Igor comes from.
He comes in from Son of Frankenstein.
Is that what it is? And it's Lugosi, isn't it?
It's Lugosi who steals that movie.
Yeah. So I gotcha.
But we get to see the monster for the first, and there's for the first time, and he backs into the room. It's really wonderfully set up. And it's a series of like jump close-ups to his face, and they were saying people were fainting in the aisles, and oh my goodness, because people hadn't seen anything like that.
I love that shot.
Yeah, we all know what we're talking about. Yeah,
he's backing in.
It's almost like when you get an iPhone, we're not that close, but like you blow up the picture. That's what that shot reminds of, because it's just all standing there like that. Yeah. It's got that deep shadow in his eyes, and I'm like, holy shit, that is a great shot.
While we're here, let's mention who did makeup, because that's probably one of the most famous makeup artists ever, right?
Yeah, Jack Pierce created that look, and he had really taken Karloff's features. The flat head comes from, they were just talking about how would somebody quickly do this if I had to take someone's brain out, this is where I cut it, and this is where I put the brain in. Karloff sunken eyes.
I put something on the top of it. Yeah,
right. That's all Jack Pierce. That's all Jack Pierce's magic on that. Karloff had a dental bridge that he would take out of his mouth to give him a sunken cheek look to that.
Mm-hmm. There are behind the scenes photos of that. Like you can find them.
Him in the chair and stuff.
And that was before latex appliances
with the cigarette in his hand.
He's building all that brow and stuff up out of cotton and wax and all that kind of stuff, and it holds up till today. It still holds
probably
up
a bunch of flammable material.
Absolutely, probably horrific for his health. Probably toxic.
Now, quick, I'm not going to segue. I just want to throw this out there to my two comrades here. So, Frankenstein makeup or mummy makeup?
As the better makeup?
Yeah, what do you guys think? Because I love the mummy makeup, dude. That looks really good.
Mummy?
Yeah, the Karloff mummy.
I absolutely love the Karloff mummy. I mean, that's one of my favorites. I mean, he's only on screen for like 2 minutes, but as the wrapped up mummy, but it's probably one of my favorite.
Looks great.
Yeah, it looks fantastic.
Yeah, so it's like, that's a hot take right there. I think that I love the mummy makeup. I love Karloff in the mummy makeup. No offense to Frankenstein. Like, that is great. That is burned in our history no matter what. But that mummy, just something about it. And with the makeup process that they had and stuff, you got to give a testament out to these guys that filmed it. You're with the lighting and everything to try to get that right shot, because, 70-foot tall screens of Karloff and the Frankenstein monster makeup, like Jim said, people passing out in the seats and stuff.
Yeah.
And don't pass on Frankenstein. Don't move on before you talk about that highly controversial scene.
Oh, sure. Well, we established him really early on as being a very sympathetic character. And Fritz is torturing him, and and then Dr. Frankenstein his teacher decide, well, we'll drug him and we'll kill him and we'll just be done with it. Obviously, we made a horrible mistake. This is not good. The creation scene is fantastic with all the Kenneth Strickfaden machinery, all the the lights and the lightning and all of that stuff.
I love the fact that young Frankenstein used that same...
The actual machinery.
Yes.
That is so...
Yes.
If you want to get a little tie-in.
I'm glad somebody mentioned that. The exact same set piece, like 100 years later or whatever, Absolutely awesome.
Awesome tribute.
And pre-code in Frankenstein, we get the it's alive. And it goes, now I know what it feels like to be God, But then... Oh. The code comes around and they're like, oh, that's really blasphemous. We can't have that. And that's the whole point. That's the whole point of Dr. Frankenstein, was that he was being blasphemous by daring to create life.
Right.
So they cut that for a very long time.
Playing God, man. Yeah. Oh, my God.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned set pieces. Because I like some of those early German expressionistic films, the Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, stuff like that. Was it some of that coming over to Universal, you think?
Yeah, that's coming over to the Universal stuff. There's a lot of filmmakers coming in from Germany because they don't like what's going down there. And what's leading up to. We get a lot of people taking off from there. But German Expressionism is certainly, especially in Son of Frankenstein, that whole house is a German Expressionist set piece.
Yeah.
So the monster is on the loose, and he encounters little Maria, right? In a scene that also gets cut later on, right? So
yeah. That's what I'm saying. Yeah, considered so horrific.
But he's like a roaming infant, though. He doesn't know what he's doing. Right?
He has a childlike innocence that kids can see. That little girl didn't see a horrible guy. She was like, "Oh, you want to play?"
Nope.
And they're playing that game, and and he runs out
of flowers,
runs out of pretty things to throw in the water, right? And when it goes wrong for him, he immediately realizes that he screwed up, and he's like, "Oh my god,
dude, he's got that whole
he's terrified. Yeah, he is terrified."
That's such a good scene, man.
Makes it even more sad, right?
Yeah, it makes it more heartbreaking.
What's the rule, gentlemen, that we all know? What's the two things you're not supposed to do in films? That
don't kids or pets.
Yeah, that was like the unwritten rule for years. And this thing's back in 1930 and stuff. It's like, holy cow.
And there's this really like evocative tracking shot, especially for its day, of the dad walking into the village carrying his drowned daughter.
Yeah. Mark's got a story for that, right?
And he's not holding a dummy. He's holding like this girl. So this guy's arms had
a kid. Yeah. Oh my God, dude. Yeah. So are you talking about that Universal thing?
Yeah.
Bob? Oh man.
Quick story.
So I was on my honeymoon, and that village set still stands at Universal at 100 years old.
Just a few years ago, right?
Yeah, talking to us about it. And dude, I'm losing it. Like, you got people who are like, all right, let's move on to the next, But like, I'm standing there and dude, I'm closing my eyes and I'm seeing, you know what I mean? I'm seeing that black and white. I'm seeing the pitchforks. And the dude's like, hey, are you okay? I'm like, I'm actually like, this is awesome for me. I'm a huge fan of that, So he was just like, don't wander off too bad. I wandered off, man. I'm like, I gotta check out this village. God, I loved it and stuff. But
that's pretty wild.
So I had to be like, yeah, I gotta go. And it's really weird because what you don't know, folks, is they will paint it a certain color that will reflect in a black and white film. That'll come out a certain way. So the village is all these weird, bright colors. Like it's it's not painted dingy. It's all like, oh, look at the pretty, like aqua and other stuff, but and by the fountain and everything, I'm just like, oh my God, like you got that come to Jesus moment. Like it was like, I can't imagine that ever happening again. I probably won't get out there, but
all right, hallowed ground.
Then we get our angry villagers who go hunt down Frankenstein, and there's more expressionistic mountain sets with a painted cyclorama of a
that
movie sky
is cool looking too.
Yeah, chase them to the windmill.
Dude, that imagery has popped up in so many films, though. I was just watching Tim Burton's Sleepy Hollow the other day.
Yeah.
That's the same imagery. Yeah, he's
absolutely.
got that angled shot with it. Yeah, they're
And
all
then-
trying to pay homage to that.
And then they chuck, there's a confrontation between Frankenstein and then the monster in the mill, and
Yeah.
he chucks Frankenstein over the side.
Dr. Frankenstein?
Dr. Frankenstein over the side, and a terrible dummy hits the
Yeah.
windmill and slides off. And they play it up like he's dead. So the villagers set the mill on fire,
Right.
and then the monster is like you're feeling for him because he's terrified because he's trapped in this burning mill, and then
Fire is his biggest fear, right?
yeah, fire is his biggest fear. Yeah,
Great scene in Young Frankenstein, by the way, with the fire thing. So we're gonna have to do that one separately because holy cow.
My God.
Yeah.
I am so in the mood for Young Frankenstein.
I know, right? Let's spend some time with Mel Brooks.
So that's where that film ends, and the second movie, Bride, picks up, right? So Bride picks up where it's the ruins of the mill, but we find out that the monster is alive.
Monster's alive.
He's fallen through the floorboards into the water. When we get to Bride of Frankenstein, it's
a different tone, right?
Right. It's a different tone because of the code.
Right. It's just after code, right?
And it's of all the Frankenstein films, it's considered the masterpiece. There's a lot of black comedy going on in there. We get to humanize the monster because he speaks now.
Yeah.
This is where he meets the blind hermit. There's a lot of religious iconography in that. In the hermit
not
scene.
Played by Gene Hackman.
I was just going to say, played by Gene Hackman.
In the hermit scene, when he finally makes a friend, he's kind of crying in bed, and they kind of close the shot out with this kind of zoom in fade on the cross that's hanging on the wall.
Yeah.
In the blind man's thing. And then again, he's misunderstood and more rampage. And then we finally get to the introduction of the bride at the very end. And her look is iconic. Her movements are iconic, right? She didn't ask to be alive either.
The movements are actually pretty good. Her jerky
head movements,
bird-like. It's very bird-like.
Yeah. She said she modeled her hiss on a swan.
That's cool. I never knew that one.
So, and then originally everybody was supposed to die in the explosion, but if you watch the footage, if you watch the footage of the castle exploding, there you could see Dr. Frankenstein in the long shot. He's still in there.
I didn't know that. Okay.
I think it didn't test well with audiences, so they let them live. So he does the "you go, you live." Yeah.
Universal Monsters is your first.
They call it a cinematic universe.
Cinematic universe. So Universal Monsters is like your first cinematic universe.
Well, especially when we get to adding crossover characters like the Wolfman. That's when it becomes a shared universe. Right?
That's a great segue, because I'd like to get on that one real quick. I know the Mummy is in between there, but the Mummy is such a different outlier that it's more of a seductive. Karloff plays the Imhotep character is very seductive and it's a very how would you say it? Sensual. He's trying to get the woman, the spirit from the past into the current woman, and
I liken it to Egyptian Dracula. Right?
Yeah, okay. Right. Yeah, that's not bad. Yeah.
We still get Edward Van Sloan from Dracula.
He's a little more sinister. Yeah, he's sinister than Frankenstein.
That's a thriller movie. It's not.
I mean, I still love it, but some would consider it boring, right?
Yeah, it's not. I don't consider it horror.
A supernatural thriller, would you consider
supernatural
that?
thriller? Yeah, there we go. That's the good one. Yeah.
So we don't have to dive into that one too much.
Yeah, but Wolfman goes right back to horror.
Wolfman, let me just say, Wolfman gives me, when I think of the Universal monster, that the fog, the trees, that, the Michael Jackson Thriller, that whole thing gives me the picture in my mind of
Universal horror movies.
Yeah,
Michael Jackson Thriller. How does that fit into that one?
Just the foggy. Well, that was in color.
Cinematography.
But Wolfman in black and white translates really well.
Who plays the Wolfman?
So Lon Chaney Jr. comes in to claim his, Creighton Chaney, who changes his name to Lon Chaney Jr. At the studio's behest, showed up prior to the Wolfman in a movie called The Man-Made Monster, which is a kind of a science fiction-y horror movie but the Wolfman is
Right.
his baby, as he termed it.
okay.
He was very proud and protective of that character, and Lon Chaney Jr. gets a bad rap a lot of times for being heavy-handed, but he is fantastically portrays sympathetic characters. I think prior to this, he portrayed Lenny in Of Mice and Men with Burgess Meredith.
Yeah, he is a
And,
tortured soul. Yeah.
yeah,
That's the
he
tortured soul movie. So as much as Frankenstein,
and as a kid, yeah, he really sold me on that. Again, he's the outsider. He's the almost American coming to back home to England, and
yeah, right.
in an unfortunate circumstance, he is bitten by a werewolf who turns out to be Bela, who was portrayed by Bela Lugosi. So
Makes a great appearance. Yep.
who makes a great appearance again, but in wolf form. So we never see him fighting a wolf man, but we see him fighting a wolf.
I heard a story about that real quick. The dog that he fought with, like, bit him and like broke bone, and he ended up adopting the dog.
Oh, that might be
In real
Moose.
life.
He had a big German Shepherd called Moose. There's a great
That's
picture
the
of
dog.
him in one of the Mummy movies there's a picture of him in one of the Mummy movies where he's in his makeup and he's laying. It's an off-camera photo. He's laying with his head in a refrigerator to keep him cool, and the dog is kind of laying on him next to him. It's a great photo. If I can find it, I'll send it to you.
Nice.
But
That walk on hind legs in the Wolfman, man. I even
Right.
when a kid, that got me. I was like, that is so cool. You know, like I understand it nowadays, but
Jack Pierce makeup, it slightly changes over the films, but not by much. But it's also very time consuming. I think at this point we've gotten to a rubber nose, but it's all the time lapse photography and his changing
Hours.
of the Wolfman is fantastic.
you don't get an actual Wolfman nowadays. So the makeup and the hairy hands,
Right,
and
you get
stuff like that,
werewolves, right? Nowadays,
yeah. So you don't get Wolfman. Although
Which
there's
is
a
one of
new
the-
one coming out now, so I don't know what it's going to look like.
Well,
so.
that's one of the things I really appreciated on the Benicio del Toro remake is that they were wolfmen. He was a wolfman.
Yeah, they did that. And why does that thing get such hate, man? I thought it was
I don't
a
know.
good movie.
It's a
Yeah, I
really
don't
good
get
movie.
it.
It was
It's-
well done.
It's gothic. It's period piece. Maybe some of the acting's not that good, but it subverted the whole story.
And I had heard that they had planned a sequel with the Inspector Hugo Weaving's character going to America and being a werewolf because he was bitten.
That's cool.
Um,
Yeah,
and I'm
that's.
like,
I mean, I
there's
don't know,
that
do
movie.
they have
I
a
would've watched
stacked
that all
cast
day.
in there. Like, oh my god,
Yeah.
man, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, back to Lon Chaney, he ends up taking the love interest from the other man she was with, right?
Yeah, just by
I
a little
believe.
creepy peeping on her from a telescope from across the. Yes, yeah, he ends
Yeah,
up.
not so sympathetic at that point.
No, he's kind of getting a
Well,
little.
she
creeper.
falls in love with him, and
Right.
then he tries to protect her, and it's a classic story, and it still translates all the way today. And there's movies
Yeah,
made
I get it.
And he has a
that pay
tragic
homage to
ending,
that.
and a lot of the lore that we get with the werewolf, which is folklore, but a lot of it that we get cinema-wise comes from this movie, and was invented for this movie.
American Werewolf in London.
Here's the thing, too. Well, American Werewolf in London, they just threw out everything. Like there's no silver bullets. There's none of that. They just said, okay, he's a werewolf, and we can just shoot him with a shotgun, and they kill him. But the cane in the movie has that silver head. It's got the silver wolf's head, and then there's legend lore about that because they didn't use a gun. They didn't use a silver bullet. I don't know where that comes from as far as the lore goes, but like the cane with the silver wolf's head is what undermines them, so to speak, at the end or whatever. And I think to this day, there's something about that I like. Guns are cool, silver bullet, but it's like, man, if you got a good sniper, you kill that werewolf from 1,000 yards out.
Sure,
you know what
wouldn't
I
have to worry
mean?
about
And
it,
it's just
right.
but boy, he had to get up in there, and that's terrifying. Those two are going at it,
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
At the end, I'd be like, yeah, man, that get the heart pumping in any kid. Wolfman holds a special place in my heart that I always imagined you, Jim. You're like the Frankenstein guy.
Oh, I liked the Wolfman because it was effects, and I figured out how to do
Yeah.
that, and that was all.
While we're at it here, so what's everyone's fave? Like, what do you guys? You know what I mean? If you had to.
Dracula's my least favorite because it's always a guy, and that's just because of the time.
Yeah. Okay. Okay.
I don't know. I guess probably Frankenstein.
I know I have a hard time. I mean, because I really like the Mummy.
They're different flavors, though.
Yeah. See, I'm gonna go with the Mummy just because of that. It was so different, but it was a monster. But holy crap, it's a bad guy. You know what I mean? Like that. Something about the Mummy really speaks to me. Yeah.
Yeah, but the Mummy is definitely has always portrayed all the way through every Mummy movie. It's always the lost love drives that character. You didn't get that from Dracula until I was reading something and they said until like the Jack Palance version.
Holy cow.
They didn't weave in that, oh, you're the reincarnation of my lost love. That doesn't come in until that far down.
The Palance one, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, you got to have a villain, so you can't make him too sympathetic, especially in the modern movies that they've been doing. The Brendan Fraser mummies or the Coppola Draculas, like, but the Coppola Dracula, that's just, that dude's having a romance with Keanu Reeves' wife, throughout the whole movie. So, like, until he confronts, like, the group, that's when you get a bad guy. Other than that, you get some dudes just trying to romance a woman throughout the whole thing because it's his lost love. You know what I mean? And the Mummy's the same way, except he's like, once he gets to be the actor Arnold Vosloo, you're like, okay, he's just a man. He's trying to get that reincarnated love.
The Karloff Mummy is the best, and I can't think of one. I know Lon Chaney Jr. was the Mummy in the later
he becomes
movies.
More of a prop, or like a Terminator is what he becomes. Like, because there's always an evil priest that's brewing up
who sicks the mummy
tea leaves and sicks them on all the people that defiled the grave of the princess, right? That's really
they're fun Saturday afternoon Sir Graves, movies on. But I just the horror, cool looking mummies never from then on after Karloff. I just cannot think of one that I can think of as better looking.
And Karloff's
even up till today.
His leading lady in the Mummy, I think Zita Johann, I think was her name. And I don't remember how many films she did, but she's really, really good. It's kind of like this haunted, I can remember my past lives, and she's very, very good in that.
I do want to say something. Here's what's crazy, because, like, given the time frame of when I was a kid, my introduction to the Universal Monsters is going to come from Abbott and Costello.
Right.
Like, it's not going to come from the original sources, but seeing those, I clearly have memories of on the couch watching that, and Bud reading from the thing as Dracula's trying to wake. There's a certain sense of heightened tension in my heart. Even as a kid, I'm like, okay. So, and Dracula he was pretty much portrayed straight as Dracula in that movie. They all were. But I was like, oh man, like I do. And then him walking through the pier at the end, where it's like, even at that moment, I was like, oh damn, I'm sympathetic to that monster. Like, they're burning his ass up and he's going to fall through. Like, but then after that, I'm like, not that I, as a 6-year-old, ever got to go seek it out, but oh, what is this Dracula? What is this Frankenstein? Yeah, I'm going to see what that is. But I always imagined, like, that Abbott and Costello was a perfect ending, so to speak, because it's like, hey, let's bring these guys back. And what have the monsters been doing for 30 years? Oh, that guy's in a fucking warehouse. You got to read the lore to wake it up. Like, I just thought that was really clever,
One of the things I think that makes Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein so good is that the people in it are genuinely terrified of those monsters, be it comedically or not. They're freaking out.
Absolutely.
Where you don't really kind of get that in the monster movies that led up to that. So,
yeah.
All the House of Draculas and the House of Frank. It's like, oh, it's the monster. Okay. Well, it's pretty scary, but
yeah. There's not that genuine terrified moment out of all that,
Right.
Well, there's only a couple other ones that we mentioned before. After the Wolfman was Phantom of the Opera with Claude Rains.
Yeah, that remakes the Chaney movie. Yeah, Invisible Man. Anyone?
Yeah,
Yeah,
I mean,
it's true. That was.
I mean, that's another James
pre-code
Whale, and
33. Yeah.
it's a pre-code, and it's got a fantastic opening from the minute that he's walking in from the snow into that pub to the point where they bust in on him and he unwraps himself, and that was unknown state-of-the-art effects at the time.
yeah,
It's
yeah.
fantastic, and he's like throwing his nose at him, and it was almost
that's pretty good.
It was almost a green screen process, but it involved black velvet. Everything was wrapped in black velvet.
Oh, okay. Oh my god!
And Claude Rains is, he's a wonderful actor, so his voice, the voice is really what carries that. You had to have someone with a riveting voice, and then the fact that the whatever concoction he brewed up was slowly turning him insane or evil.
Right. It says fall into madness. Yeah.
Let's just use the word insane.
And he couldn't replicate it, no matter how hard he tried.
Yeah, that's a tragic figure right there. He can never come back. He's always invisible. You know, everybody thinks that would be a cool power to have for about a week.
Well, I think there was this whole thing where it's like, hey, I close my eyes. I can't close my eyes because I don't have eyelids. I can't, I see everything all the time.
Right. I remember something about that. Oh my God, that's terrifying, man. Holy.
And they made a series of Invisible Man women agent movies. Some of them were comedy, some of them were not. The Invisible Man Returns has Vincent Price as the villain. So again, another one of those where the voice helps carry it through. And then, of course, he shows up at the end of Abbott Costello Meets Frankenstein. So,
oh yeah, right. Yeah, he's sitting there smoking a cigarette. That's that's a great kind of cameo ending, dude. I forgot about that. What's the Mummy? The Mummy's an original concept, right?
Right. It all.
That's not based on a source material.
No, it all comes from the fascination that we had with the
King Tut,
unearthing all the King Tut, and unearthing all the tombs, and the curse of King Tut, and
in the late 20s, early 30s,
the fascination of Egyptology, in that era.
I just know that some of that stuff comes from source materials, which is interesting that somebody wrote those things 30 years before we did a film. That's crazy. And the Wolfman doesn't. That's another original material too, I think.
Right.
That doesn't come from a source material.
That's their baby.
Yeah.
So,
cool.
And I was going to give a shout out to the movie that was made because he couldn't make his Universal Creature from the Black Lagoon movie, Shape of Water. So
right.
That's a good movie. That's a really good movie.
Guillermo del Toro, right? Yeah.
And then we should, as we're talking about Guillermo del Toro, he just finished rapping on his version of The Bride of Frankenstein. So to star Mia Goth and Oscar Isaac and...
Oh, man.
I just, some of these directors are hella directors. But the fact that they go to Universal or wherever, they get this property that they can do, you know what I mean? It's just different. Like Jim, you and I grew up in the Marvel bullpen era, where everything's interconnected and stuff. And now you just get to make your one-off film and stuff. So, like the Wolfman that's coming out, that's just all modern times, about a family and dads that's cursed or something like that. Right. So it's like, oh, okay, Well, although check out the trailer for this movie called Werewolves. It's such a looks like a B schlocky movie. Great. Right, check out the trailer. It just came out.
It's on our Facebook page.
So check out that trailer because it's kind of like, let's just make a fun movie about werewolves.
Universal Studios theme park they're in, it should be completing it soon. They're doing a whole dark universe part of their theme park now.
Yep. So thank you. Yep. And I've seen all the stuff on it, and it's probably the one thing that's going to get me and the wife to go on another trip. Because I'm definitely gonna want to go check that out.
What I don't understand about the Universal Monsters is how they are not licensed to the hilt like Santa Claus and Rudolph and all that stuff is for Halloween, for Christmas. Why don't they just they should be synonymous with Halloween by now. All these classic movie monsters.
Yeah, you know what? Do you figure the family's got enough money that they don't need to worry about licensing stuff? Because that's a good point.
Well,
That's
Sarah
a real good
Karloff
point,
sold off her claim to Boris's likeness for stuff. So
put it on there and put it out there. You know what I mean?
And a lot of the stuff too is that there's some things that Universal owns, like Squarehead Frankenstein. Like you can't make anything like that,
Oh my god!
And it's like that's why we also get a lot of like Dracula stuff that doesn't look like Bela Lugosi. It's because his
I get that. Yeah, there's a company called Jada that they made some figures, and they look like if Dracula was like kind of mean, like not suave like Lugosi and stuff. So I was like, oh okay, but it still works for me because Dracula's a vampire. So put some fangs on it, and you're good.
Right. The Wolfman is makeup, so they own the makeup for the Wolfman, the likeness of that. So
we should wrap it up.
All right, fellas. Yeah,
our little tribute to Universal Monsters, the classic ones.
Hope you guys enjoyed it. I'd like to hear more comments from people. We're starting to get quite a few.
What are their favorites?
Yeah. So, what are your guys' favorites? And again, I will say this. I don't say it all the time, but I say it about every couple months. You got some ideas that you'd like to see us cover something? Throw it out there.
I'd be curious if people are turned off to black and white. I wonder if that's still a thing with people.
That's a good question. I didn't even think about that one. Yeah. Color ones didn't come until, what are we talking, the 50s, was it?
Well, Hammer kind of just blasted the screen of color, right?
Well, we enter the atomic age for Universal and all that stuff, and we get those monsters.
Like the giant bug era and Invasion of the Body Snatchers, just stuff like that. Oh my God, those are so good.
Thanks for watching, everybody, and join us next time. And in the meantime, check out our Instagram page, the Fandom Outpost. We share a lot of our collections and things that we're into. It's a great source of learning more about what this channel's about. And also, you can touch base with us on Facebook. We try to keep things, what's happening with upcoming movies and things, and maybe we can chit-chat about that. Please like and subscribe to this video. We'd really appreciate that. And comment, because we'd love to hear from you. With that, we'll say thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time on the Fandom Outpost.